Hello everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Bit of a bonus video this week because we've got the Las Vegas open preview and information about the High Elves of Uthlan. So, before we do our usual turn and look at what's coming, a quick caveat in that I'm not really a High Elf player. I've come across them, I think, once in Warhammer The Old World. It's a faction I've toyed with the idea of a few times during the old Warhammer Fantasy days, but never really got on with painting-wise. I think maybe stylistically they don't suit how I go about things. However, this isn't to say I'm not interested in what's going on, and I will comment as best as I can from my position of relative ignorance. So this is very much, do these models capture my attention? Well, let's start off by looking at those models. Let's look at the Battalion box set. What are we getting? Well, as is pretty traditional now with the battalions, we're getting a whole lot of core. In this case, there's 66 miniatures. 34 of them are going to be core. We've got 32 spearmen and 32 archers. Overall, I think the initial impression would be that they are probably fairly weak units overall from what I've seen. Archers can be an annoyance, but they're not massively brilliant, although longbows can be annoying with their long range. But I think this force does probably play into one of the armies of infamy, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Backing up this force is 2 line chariots of trace. Now they can be done, I think, as line chariots or regular chariots pulled by horses. The ones pulled by lions, obviously far cooler, far more interesting, and again can be used for one of the particular armies of infamy, perhaps more prevalently than some of the others. No characters, as is normal with these battalion box sets. Before I really talk about the value, though, I think on this box set we need to have a look at what we know about the Arcane Journal itself. Pretty standard. We're getting 2 armies of infamy, we're getting some special characters, new units, etc. The armies of infamy are going to be a Thracian war host and a Seagard garrison. Now, I think we kind of knew Krace was going to be picked up as an army of infamy because of the special character that was apparently available for sale through nefarious means before the official release. In fact, before this very notification that Uthlan is coming down the track. So before then I was probably thinking we'd have an all-mounted force because they seem quite prevalent, and I was wondering whether Trionic forces would get that look in. Slightly odd out of the sort of side, really. But the long beaches, they're known for their cavalry, their chariots, stuff like that, so I thought they might be an interesting twist. But hey ho, we haven't got those. We've got Trace and the Seagard garrison. Now it is the Seagard which I think this battalion box set really seems to come into into the fore. Why so? Well, traditionally speaking, Seagard were a mixture of using spears and archers. They could carry both weapons. So you could use these models to represent those Seagard units potentially, and I think with new units in the book we might see some things which lean into those sort of forces. So without knowing the contents of the box, or sorry, the book, because hey, I don't get the copy of these things early, I would suggest that that is perhaps where the value is going to lie with this particular box set. But like all of the battalion boxes, I do think it probably struggles a little bit and isn't as a strong starting place for an army. I think so far the dwarf one looks quite promising. The Empire one is okay if you want to do null. Outside of that, yeah, you can do everyone as a mixture of handguns and crossbows, I suppose, to get a lot of gunline goodness out of it. But overall, I don't think we're seeing massively strong choices with these Battalion box sets. That being said, let's now go and have a look at some of the new miniatures that we're seeing. And the first one is the Lord of Trace. I don't really know massively what to say about this. Now, it might be the image that we're seeing on Warhammer Community. It doesn't look that interesting to me. The Lion Cape, I don't know, it looks a little bit of an AI image rather than anything particular, which is disappointing. The axe is obviously ridiculous, but they always are. It just doesn't stand out to me as interesting. Might be, say, the paint job, it might be the image, but this isn't a character which blows me away. Ishaya Vess, however, the Sentinel of the Silent Isle, actually this is a lot more of an interesting model. It's very dynamic, it's got some interesting lines to it, and even if I don't think you weren't necessarily picking up the High Elves, I could see this model actually being quite nice in other things. So skirmish games, for example, maybe for other settings where you want an elf type character, or even maybe a Mordheim character, something like that. I can see this model or just actually being nice to paint. So this one grabs my attention to a far greater degree. The Sentinel of the Silent Isle is going to be a resin model, so I would imagine, as with always characters, you're going to be paying quite a chunky price for this one, but this is, of the two characters we're seeing here, the one that grabs my interest the most. Turning next to the Ilrian Reavers, these are based off the Isle of Blood box set from back in 2010, according to the Warhammer Community article, and I have to say, of the models I've seen flicking through this article, these are the ones that I look at and go, well, actually, yeah, I really like these are interesting. Light shot cavalry, so very much what, if you've seen any of my previous videos, I would rate as medium cavalry. They are not massively well armoured, they're reasonably good on the charge, they're not going to hang around like a fully armoured, heavily armoured knight, but these models just look massively cool. I really like the look of them. I think there's enough detail here to be interesting. You can do some, if you like painting horse flesh, there's plenty of that available to do different colours and stuff. There's a lot of feathers and decoration, so yeah, I think you could really go to town and make this unit look seriously sweet. If we now look at some of the returning plastics, we're seeing, unsurprisingly probably, the Dragon kit that was available back in the time of Warhammer 8th edition. High Elves obviously absolutely renowned for their dragons. They're a huge part of the lore, and I think this dragon set is one that's useful not just actually to High Elf players, but for pretty much any faction which has access to a dragon. Why so? Well, this I think would be relatively easy to convert, because all you need to do is change the rider in the throne to have a really cool centerpiece model with a rider that suits your faction, whether that be a warrior of chaos, a dark elf, a high elf, whatever that might be. As long as we're not looking at bone dragons, then I think you've got a fighting chance of being able to use this figure in some way, shape or form. We're also going to be getting the Phoenix well, it's the Phoenix kit that came as either a Flamespire or a Frostheart, so I think really that comes down to paint job more than many other things. There's obviously, we've got then the slew of command models which we're going to have available to us, a mixture of warriors, mages, etc. Yeah, I mean, they look fairly decent, and these are noted as returning plastic, so not necessarily new figures. Looking more at the rank and file side of it, we've got Dragon Princes. Now, Dragon Princes I have come up against on the battlefield, and these guys are pretty dashed nasty, able to move quickly and dish out quite a bit of pain. So I can see how these units would see some purchasing and be quite useful on the field. Perhaps unlike things like Silver Helms, which don't really hit that sort of desired result. Then in plastic we've also got a range of other special infantry floating around, as I'm sure you'd expect. So Swordmasters, we've got White Lions, things like that. Again, we're looking at returning plastics. It's models that we should all be pretty familiar with if you are a veteran to the game. The Lothern Skycutter is coming back in plastic. A mobile bolt thrower, yeah, could be quite interesting. See how that particularly goes. Not something I've seen in many lists, but I'm sure some people will find its place. And obviously the chariots that we mentioned from the Battalion box set also going to be available. Looking at metals, we're told there are 3 metal kits coming. The Handmaiden of the Everqueen. We've got Corhill and Limemain, so this is the chappie that was available for sale before he should have been available for sale. And we've got Great Eagles coming at some point later down the line. So there's actually quite a lot going on for High Elves. I do like the models of the High Elves. It's just part of me's always, for some reason, never got my brain into a position where I can effectively paint them. It's much like Eldar, actually, in Warhammer 40,000. I think to some extent, my slightly rough and dirty style of painting, I'm always a bit put off by the clean lines of the elves. But yeah, I think there are some lovely models in this range, and I am looking forward to seeing them perhaps represented a little bit more on the battlefield. But this isn't it, of course. There is more to look at, because as well as the High Elves, we're also seeing a Bray Shaman for the Beastmen. And this is a single special character by the looks of it, in the form of Crowmore. Now, it's a nice-ish looking model. There's a fair amount going on. If you're a skilled painter, I think you could probably get quite a lot out of this figure. However, if you're using classic Beastman colours, i.e. brown, I think it might be difficult to make this character look good. Now, I might be wrong on this, and it might be something that anyone could turn around fairly easily, but I'm thinking using a muted, mostly brown colour palette, I think this could be quite difficult to really bring out all of the detail without having to spend about a year and a half doing all the edge highlighting. Now, Beastmen have never been an army that have appealed to me, basically because there's just that little bit too much brown, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I'll close by having a quick look at the core faction list. We know that we've got Bretonnians, Tomb Kings, Orcs and Goblins, Dwarves, Warriors of Chaos and Empire out and available. We know that High Elves have been revealed, and we know, as is labelled in the image in front of you, that Beastmen and Wood Elves are here still to come. But interestingly, there is another tiny little box in the more to come section. And the question is, what does this represent? Now, looking at the image, it does kind of look like maybe there's a horse sort of shape. And I have seen some speculation online as to whether it might be Kislev, whether it might be Cathay. couple of people may be slightly wish listing that Dark Elves are going to move from Legacy to Core. Now, my guess is, as the game is very much centered in the old world, I think it would be more likely to be Kislev. That is my guess, and it would allow Games Workshop to move the story on towards the Chaos incursions and the events happening along those sort of border territories, and it'd be an interesting way of expanding the game and getting a little bit of play going from those sort of storylines, and as I say, moving the narrative onwards. Even though we don't know what this faction is, I think the fact that there is another faction being suggested is going to come really helps put to bed some of the fears people may have around the game being a once and done. So release the factions, get the models out, take the money and run into the distance. This does look like there's ongoing effort being put into the game, and I really hope that's the case, because I have been really enjoying my time at playing it. So overall, I think there is quite a lot of news coming out of the Las Vegas Open when it comes to Warhammer The Old World. We've got a new faction coming. We don't know exactly when, but it's coming hopefully relatively soon. We're seeing the sort of models we're getting. We're seeing what some of the new figures are going to look like, and we're getting hints at a brand new faction. I'll be really interested to know what you think about the High Elves. Obviously, as always, do pop those comments down below, and I'll have a look to see what people are saying. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed the video, do consider a like and subscribe. It's really the best ways of helping a small channel such as this one. Once again, thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.